Artificial intelligence is becoming an increasingly important part of all our lives, frequently without us even knowing about it. So, does the EU's new legislation protect citizens from harm, or will it stifle humanity's most powerful technology? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, the European Union's AI Act is the first comprehensive piece of legislation governing machine-based learning. It could affect how the industry is regulated globally. So, will it encourage the technology to flourish in the EU, or will it help mitigate concerns over its use?
Vladimir Vladimirovich, hello. I'm a student at St. Petersburg State University. I want to ask, is it true you have a lot of doubles?
It's not often that the world sees Russian President Vladimir Putin squirm. Such is the power of generative artificial intelligence. It's little wonder, then, that the European Union has enacted groundbreaking legislation to regulate the technology. The bloc's first sweeping laws on AI came into force in August, seeking to provide developers and providers guardrails for its ethical use, with major implications for its adoption and for future AI governance worldwide. Fears over deepfakes, misinformation, state surveillance, and copyrighted material have grown globally thanks to AI's increasing role in everyday life. The bloc's outgoing digital chief, Margarita Vestager, said, "With these landmark rules, the EU is spearheading the development of new global norms to make sure AI can be trusted." But what exactly does the regulatory framework oversee? The Act bans the specific use of the technology and mandates transparency from its providers. It will roll out regulation in stages through to 2027. And it classifies different types of AI according to the risks they pose, demanding more transparency as the risk level increases. There's no regulation for low-risk applications such as AI-generated video games or spam filters. Chatbot and text and image-generating tech have to state or label that they are created by a machine. High-risk applications include those used in health and law enforcement that perform biometric surveillance or emotion recognition. And the Act prohibits AI systems that deceive or manipulate human behavior or try to predict criminal traits.
Artificial intelligence is transforming, revolutionizing many things. The Chinese and the Americans are investing much more, and I think that we, Europeans, have a special role to play because we have the capabilities, the possibility to make and invent our model.
The Act got a decidedly mixed reception. While EU and business leaders recognized the need for regulation, they were concerned that the Act could hamper the bloc's competitiveness. Critics said the legislation was too rushed with too many loopholes, and startups were concerned about the fiscal cost of the new rules. In September, the US, EU and UK signed the first international treaty on AI with human rights and democratic values at its heart. It legislates against bias and harmful practices, prioritizes equality and privacy, and gives its victims legal recourse. So does the EU's Act help lay the groundwork for better AI use?
Well, let's meet our guests. Lucie Laker is Chief Data Officer for the National Health Service in Somerset in the UK. Chris Sykes is a Senior Lecturer at Manchester Law School and the Faculty Deputy AI Lead. He joins us from Manchester in the UK. Simeon Campos is the founder of SaferAI. That's an organisation that works on managing the risks associated with large language models like ChatGPT. He joins us from Paris. And here with me in the studio is Rohit Talwar, a global futurist and CEO at Fast Future. That's a research and insights business that helps clients understand emergent technologies. You're all very welcome to Roundtable. Rohit, I'll come to you first of all. I mean, we should applaud the EU on doing this, shouldn't we? They're leading the world. Someone is finally giving us some guidelines and regulations on AI.
Absolutely, and they've taken the very bold move of putting a stake out there and saying, here's how we're going to try and regulate it and guide people as to the different types of risks we need to protect against. And I'm sure my colleagues will go into that in more detail. But they really tried to do that and provide some clarity. The challenge for them, as with everyone else around the world, is that AI is moving at such a pace that you're always regulating for what's happened rather than what's coming next. And we almost don't know exactly what the tech firms and the innovators are working on. We have a clue, but they're not going to tell us exactly what they're building because there are literally hundreds of billions of dollars at stake with each new wave of development. So we have to applaud the development of these regulations. We have to see how effective they are. But the real challenge is getting the developers and the people creating the technology to buy into working with these regulations and highlighting when they're doing something that falls outside the regulations and going back to the EU and saying, look, this is something that wasn't catered for. How do we deal with this? Rather than blaming the EU for not anticipating what millions of developers around the world could be doing.
So just to play devil's advocate here, I mean, the United Kingdom's not in the European Union. So if I'm running a tech company, maybe I just relocate to the UK.
Well, you'd still want to sell to clients in the rest of Europe, and there would be some level of noise about the fact that you'd come to the UK to be less regulated and therefore higher risk, providing less safety to your customers and less safety to their data. So the optics of that wouldn't be very good. The UK has an opportunity to actually be able to move even faster because it's not bound by having to get all the EU members on board. And Sunak did try to take a lead on this last year around safety. That initiative has sort of petered out a little bit, but there are things going on where the UK can take a lead and can demonstrate how you can get big commercial advantage without putting people's lives at risk, without putting our data at risk, and without causing developments and unexpected consequences that could destabilise economies.
Lucie, you work in the National Health Service. Keir Starmer, new British Prime Minister, he has said he is going to perform major surgery on the NHS. Can you see AI helping improve the deliverance of health services across the UK?
Of course, yeah. I mean, the application of AI is going to be phenomenal for health, but it needs to be done in a way that's transparent. It needs to be done in a way that respects people's privacy, and it absolutely needs to be done with the kind of patient safety in mind. So I'm a real fan of this legislation. I think we should be looking at something very similar, obviously, in the UK. And I think it's incumbent, certainly from a public sector perspective, for us to treat data and people's privacy to a high level.
And do you think, in the coming years, we will see similar legislation brought in by this new government here in the UK?
Yes, I mean, I think so, but I also think that we have an opportunity. We have some great talent here in the UK. I previously ran an AI business working across Europe and further afield and selling into the NHS. And I think there's a real opportunity for us to drive forward some of this innovation, but to do so safely and in a way that helps the NHS and helps the patient population.
Chris, give us your reading of this new act in the European Union.
Yeah, I can only reiterate what my colleagues have said, that it's broadly welcomed. I can see that this will be the leading piece of legislation over the coming years. No doubt more secondary legislation and changes are going to be made to the AI Act. But in fact, I think it's going to be a best-in-class, piece of legislation, and I think the rest of the world are going to be watching, including the UK government. Of course, on our side at the moment, the government has previously, or perhaps the previous government has previously taken a very kind of hands-off approach, which is to a degree to be welcomed, where we want to be the jurisdiction moving quick in this area. But I think that they'll be looking at what happens in the EU They'll be taking the best elements from that. They'll be speaking to our AI industry here and speaking to businesses here more broadly and people at the CBI and trying to work out the best way to go forward. But yes, it's certainly to be welcomed. I know that there are some that say perhaps it's too stifling of innovation. But my view is that how this legislation sits at the moment, there's plenty of opportunity for innovation within that, and we still have to wait to see what's going to happen.
Simeon, I thought it was interesting what Rohit said just recently there, AI galloping ahead and the law kind of struggling to catch up. Is it a concern that, you can't legislate quick enough for AI?
I think it is a true concern, and I think it is also why the EU AI Act has taken the approach it has taken. That is to say, it has taken what they call a tiered approach, which means that they only focused on the most advanced systems that are developed by multi-billion dollars companies and where we have a rough sense of where it's overall going. And it enables to do so, to regulate without putting undue burden on smaller systems. So I think the EU AI Act has been right. A second important point to have in mind here is that there are roughly two ways to put a regulation in place. The first one is to set the bar. So you just say, those are the objectives that you have to meet, and you can use whatever means to meet those objectives. As long as you meet those objectives, will leave you alone. And that's mostly the approach that the EU AI Act has taken for large language models, for general purpose AI systems, for the most advanced systems. The other type of regulation, which is a bit more dangerous in a highly innovative environment, is to dictate the means, so how you should do things. And this has higher risks of stifling innovation, but this is not what the EU AI Act has done on general purpose AI systems.
Well, Simeon, on that point about stifling innovation, we asked ChatGPT itself, arguably the best known AI-enabled chatbot, will Europe's AI Act stifle innovation? And this is what ChatGPT wrote back to us. The Act could stifle innovation through excess compliance costs. It might make it harder to bring new technologies to market quickly, and tech talent may relocate to regions with more permissive regulatory environments, such as the US or Asia. However, the Act may also foster innovation through creating trust in AI, and having a clear regulatory framework can also reduce the risk of legal challenges and foster a more predictable environment for innovation. So, Rohit, do you think legislating AI will stifle creativity and kind of, just smother it?
No, not at all. I think the innovators will keep having ideas as we begin to understand what we can do with data. And by combining different data sets, I think creativity will grow. The challenge we have is the same challenge we've had with tech for 50 years, which is how do you make sure what you're doing is safe and doesn't cause undue risks or unexpected risks. But right now we're seeing some incredible things happening. Yesterday, we saw AstraZeneca announce that it had run this, it's developed a model using the data of 500,000 people, looking at over 20 different biomarkers, oxygen, blood, heart rate. And it's able to predict with a very high accuracy over 1,000 diseases and a whole range of cancers, a whole range of different diseases. And over 100 of those are considered to be very reliable in the prediction. And then over 100 more are considered to be exceptional. Now, if we bring that to bear with what we're hearing about the UK National Health Service right now, where productivity has actually gone down, but we've put a lot more money in, and you hear all the terms being used about it's on life support. Well, it's going to take that level of innovation and people who know how to use it or are open to using it to transform the health service. And we're going to see the same happen in education. We're already seeing the first AI classroom where AI will guide the pupil, will set the agenda with them. There'll be no teachers there. Some people are saying, well, hang on, that's depersonalizing education. But right now, if you have a class of 30 kids in a 40-minute lesson where the teacher's spending 20 minutes anyway, then each kid is going to get less than a minute. With AI, the upside is that they're going to get the complete attention of an AI. So we have to look at the benefits that are coming. The Act gives us real guidance on how to behave well as developers and how to assess the risks of what you're doing. What we have to address is the human tendency to kind of break the rules, to stretch the rules, to be driven by money. And there is a huge amount to gain right now. We've seen, even though Elon Musk isn't at the forefront of AI, the estimates are that if his wealth continues to grow at the same rate, within 3 years, he'll be our first trillionaire on the planet. So the size of the prize here with AI is so big that you can see why companies, particularly big companies, are willing to be creative around their interpretation of the rules. Because in many cases, it's worth getting caught rather than not doing it at all, because you might have made a few billion before you get caught, and then you have to pay back maybe a proportion of your revenues as a fine. But it's far outweighed by the scale of the commercial gain. So innovation's not going to be restricted, I don't think. Regulation will be very valuable if people adhere to it. But what we really have to challenge is, if you like, human behaviors here that tempt us to go outside the rules, and the financial temptation there is there to do that.
Lucie, can I just ask you how excited you are then about, looking at the positives of AI going into the health system, how excited you are about what we might see in the next few years?
Yeah, I mean, there's some phenomenal things that are going on right now, particularly around prevention and prediction. Some of the stuff that's happening in radiology around cancer detection. That's some really groundbreaking stuff that's coming out of the UK. We're doing some really incredible stuff around sort of risk stratification of at a population health level. So understanding where people might be more susceptible to certain conditions, and how we make sure that we align our commissioning alongside it. And there's some incredible ideas, and hopefully we'll see some of these come to light in the future around a much more personalised health and care experience, breaking down these organisational barriers that have been put in place by subsequent political structures, etc. That I think we're going to see a real change there, and hopefully more of a focus on the patient outcome. But I couldn't agree more with the risk. I think some of these big players, the commercial opportunity is phenomenal, particularly with health data. There's been a lot in the press recently about people being able to access health data, and it's our responsibility in terms of public services to give that trust back to the public, and to say, actually, we're going to do things the right way. If you give us the opportunity to have and access your data so that we can provide services to you and or medical interventions, we will make sure that we do the right thing by you if we use that data going forward, and we do it in a very transparent and useful way that you can understand. And I think that's going to be critical on not only government organisations as we move forward, but also these large players in the AI space that potentially might cut corners in terms of this regulation. And the thing that worries me, I guess, the most is the fact that it is a self-regulated kind of assessment. You assess yourself as to whether you sit in that high-risk category and whether you are compliant. And I think, we will see how well that goes.
Chris, I don't think anyone will have a problem with the National Health Service having our data, but can we trust these AI companies with all of our information? It's very personal.
It's a really difficult one, this. It's true that there will, of course, be individuals and businesses that will push the boundaries of this legislation. And as has just been mentioned, there's an element of self-regulation here. So there's an element where we have to trust that companies, small and large, that are working in this area will engage with the regulations properly and do the right thing. Perhaps that's always been the way with all manner of different kinds of businesses. You not only have to comply with the law, but comply with the with the moral and ethical reasons behind those particular regulations. Having said that, I think that I like to compare. Rohit mentioned before AstraZeneca Pharmaceuticals. Now, pharmaceutical industries highly regulated, very highly regulated, and that has in fact in North America and Europe allowed for the development of a very innovative industry. But of course, there isn't that kind of element of self-regulation in the pharmaceutical industry. So overall, I'd say that regulation will assist in the innovative side, but there is the chance that we're going to have issues around people breaking the rules, and of course, as has already been discussed, where we've got money involved and large amounts of money, that's going to be a pretty tricky thing to do. Now, the public at large, I think, and of course we need to take the public with us on this, are suspicious of how their data is used by AI, and perhaps less suspicious of how their data has been used the last couple of decades anyway. So there's almost a kind of a public relations element here that AI and uses of AI have to be shown to work. For example, in the NHS, if AI in various parts of the NHS is shown to be effective, efficient, improve things, and I don't think the public will have any worries about that at all. I think when it comes to private companies, it's going to be a long time until we see sanctions against companies that break the regulations of the AI Act. And so there's going to be a kind of hiatus where it feels like not much has been done on the enforcement side. But to a certain degree, we've been through this before with data protection and GDPR, where it's felt like it's a huge it is a huge piece of legislation, but a huge piece of legislation that's kind of going to change things overnight. But in actual fact, things take time to bed in. Personally, I think you always need to be circumspect when it comes to giving your personal data, and governments and government organisations need to be circumspect when giving private organisations your personal data. And I think in some industries that's more of a problem than in others. I know, for example, in my industry, in the legal industry, is already highly regulated within that industry anyway. How we treat client data, client privilege, those kind of things. And so when I talk to lawyers and future lawyers, when I'm teaching them, it's quite easy to convey the idea that you need to be aware of how data is used and what's going to happen to that data, in the same way as you'd have to be wary of not doing silly things like leaving a client's file on a bus or something like that. It's got the same kind of professional regulatory element. And no doubt, I can't speak for anything to do with the NHS, but no doubt in the future, staff at the NHS will have all kinds of training and be highly aware of how this data is used.
Thanks, Chris. Simeon, just on that point about the colossal amount of money that is washing around the AI industry, is this European legislation strong enough to make these companies just realise that, they really need to be very respectful of people's data, that it's not a Wild West free-for-all?
That's an excellent question. And I think on this matter, I do agree with what my earlier colleagues said. I think that we, at some point, not necessarily right now, but at some point in the future, we might enter in realms where the reward is so high that internally companies make the rational and cold calculation that it might be worth paying the cost of being caught rather than fully complying with the EU AI Act. Currently, the maximum penalty is from 4 to 7% of the total yearly revenue, which is big. Like for Microsoft, it would be a couple billion, but it's not such that they would go bankrupt or anything like that. And so when what we're talking about is deploying a system that might be adopted by hundreds of or billions of users and that might bring 100 billion or more of revenue, the balance is quite unclear. And so I think it might be a real issue, and this particular aspect may require some more reflection and maybe update in the future, and to ensure that the regulation is well enforced.
Rohit, Lucie, Chris, and Simeon, thank you all so much for your insights on this. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Just search for Roundtable TRT World. And if you like what you see there, please do hit that subscribe button. But for now, from me and Brady and all of the team here, goodbye and thank you for watching.